I definitely have seen the relationship between a supplier and the buyer change and become much more of a partnership. It's much more than just the act of buying. It's come down to understanding all aspects of that cycle and utilizing that as you work with a supplier. And the suppliers have responded, right? They're bringing more of that value add capability to the equation than 20, 30 years ago.
Ready to talk logistics?
But how? It can't be done.
We should probably figure out some logistics.
Welcome to another episode of Supply Chain Therapy. I'm your host, Alex Kent, joined by my fabulous co-host, Michelle McNamara. Michelle, what's happening?
Not much. Raining over here in San Francisco, but we have a great guest for you today. We have Siobhan Hunter, VP of Global Supply Chain for Ember and founder of Blind Dog Supply Chain Risk Consulting. Siobhan got her start before there was even the term supply chain, back at NCR Microelectronics, an ASIC semiconductor manufacturer. She stuck to electronics for a while as she held senior roles at Celestica, Jabil, and BlackBerry. Siobhan loves a good challenge and in turn founded her own consulting firm, Blind Dog, in 2021. Now she'll be closing the chapter on Ember to focus her wide breadth of knowledge on more projects. Siobhan, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Michelle. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Well, this is supply chain therapy after all, so let's kick it off with a collective deep breath. We inhale and we exhale. It's always so funny how much I need those when we do it.
Every time.
All right, Siobhan.
I like it.
Every time. Let's jump in. So, you know, Alex and I, we love the juice, the drama. Do you have any fun stories from your past of something that maybe went wrong or was a challenge for you in supply chain?
Yeah, I mean, there's always so many stories, right? And sometimes you tend to put them out of your mind as you move forward. But I think the one that was probably one of the more painful was a situation where a new product was coming to market. To get in front of the supply chain lead times, we went out and purchased materials, electronic components to support a volume of 150,000 finished units. And at the time, that was the volume that we were anticipating. And, you were looking at year-plus lead times on many of the electronic parts. At the time, we thought that was a wise decision. And I had, was relatively new with the company and then learned that the bill of material was not stable. So there were several changes which impacted the components on the bill of material. The product launch pushed out significantly, and then the volume subsequently went down as the market changed for that product. So you were left with a significant excess and in some cases obsolescence situation, and that was painful.
Oh, yeah. And I'm sure you're not the first to go through it. I have a lot of questions. Why don't we start? What did you learn? I mean, if you had to go through that again, is there anything, of course, you would say, yeah, I'm just not going to buy the product. But, not knowing what you know now, what would you do maybe differently?
Yeah. I mean, not buying anything really wasn't an option because, because of the state of the supply chain at the time and the lead times. But, learning from that, there's a few things I would do differently. One would be, first and foremost, understand the stability of the bill of material that you need to procure. Where is engineering at in stabilizing the design? Is it 50% frozen? Is it 90% frozen? Makes a big difference, especially from a cost and ultimate liability perspective. Two, likewise, understand how confident we are in that product launch timeframe and in the volume that you should procure. And next time, I wouldn't procure the entire BOM. I would procure only those long lead time parts, and I would size them from a financial perspective, understand with engineering, the confidence in those parts changing or being, kept on the bill of materials so that it's clear to the entire company the liability, that you're buying at risk, and what that size and cost of that liability is.
Do you think that supply chain typically does get brought in at the right time? Like, do you feel like supply chain and product were working together from the get-go?
Yeah, in this case, no. It was very late in the process, and the assumptions that were made, because I was brand new to the company, were that the bill of material was far more stable. That if we were being asked to procure, the bill of material would be stable, and that's not. Don't make that assumption. Oftentimes, engineering, and we love engineering. Don't get me wrong. Don't really understand nor really care about the consequences of those changes, because they're just thinking about what's best for the design and for the ultimate product. Understandably, but yeah, there in many cases supply chain is kind of at the tail end when ideally you want them right in there understanding the product development cycle and where you are in it.
When launching a new product, kind of walk us through, if you can, how cross-functional it is, how important it is to have, we're talking about supply chain working with engineering in this example, but what other groups are sort of included from your perspective and the contingencies that go about that? Obviously, you have to have everyone on the same page. So how does that cross-functional process work in an ideal environment? How about that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. In an ideal environment, you've got a supplier engineer or sourcing person that's involved from the get-go. So as you're designing and like even at concept stage and looking at componentry, sub-assemblies, anything that you need to procure, you've got a sourcing expert that can be helping with that. Sometimes engineering doing that sourcing, which is often the case, they're looking at it from a technical perspective, which is one attribute, but you also have, you've got to look at it from a commercial perspective as well, understanding, where's that supply base, the stability of that supplier, the pricing from that supplier. So there's much more that goes into it than just the technical capability. Oftentimes, engineers will select based on relationship, who's been contacting them, and again, that's not a bad thing. It just shouldn't be the only attribute that's brought into the picture. And so having a sourcing expert right up front so that they can really provide options to the engineering team based on technical requirements, but then also taking into account those other aspects, those commercial aspects, is really the ideal situation versus engineering selecting. And then effectively, it's too late by the time they've come to supply chain for us to bring in additional alternatives or do negotiations because they've already been designed in, if you will.
And I'm curious, we didn't even mention much of the go-to-market piece of it. Like marketing tends to be getting a lot of flack from supply chain. They have a promotion, no one even consults supply chain, and suddenly everyone's scurrying around. But I guess it depends on where in the life cycle the product is.
Where in the product life cycle. But, to use the example that I gave of the painful situation, there's a good example of where perhaps sales marketing and supply chain weren't aligned. The original demand of 150,000 was thought to be accurate. And it's hard when you're launching a brand new product that you don't have any type of competitive landscape for. There's not a like product in the industry. So I get that it's going to be difficult. But to your point, Michelle, you still do want to have some integration between the three players on what is the right number for us to launch. I mean, is it okay that we go low and potentially be constrained in a product launch, or do we want to go high and potentially have some additional materials, but we'd rather take that that approach. So that alignment between those organizations is critical.
Yep, that makes sense. Excellent. All right. Well, let's talk about your most recent venture. So you were at Ember Technologies. Can you tell us what brought you to Ember? What's been maybe interesting about that experience?
Yeah, I mean, I actually was started by doing some consulting for them. Their CEO at the time and I had worked together in the past. And when he joined Ember, he saw opportunities. It's a young company, and they were growing rapidly. And so I joined to do consulting on some of their new products. And then subsequently, they asked me to join on a full-time capacity. And I liked the product and where they were headed. And so I decided to join them full-time.
Love it. And I know you're drinking from an Ember mug. Should we do
I
a quick
am.
product plug
Well,
for Ember?
we can. I mean, yes.
All right,
Here's my
walk us
Ember
through
mug.
walk us through, Siobhan, what we're looking at for those that are unfamiliar.
Yeah, so this is the Ember ceramic mug. This is a 10-ounce mug. They come in all different colors, but the technology of the product is that inside of here is not only Bluetooth. It's not only Bluetooth enabled, so I can change the temperature of it from my app
Wow.
that's on my phone. But it's a battery that you sit on a coaster and it charges it. And then when you lift it from the coaster, it keeps it at the temperature that you've set it at. Mine is at 135 degrees, which is what I like.
Is that
And it
normal?
Is that what?
I don't know what the normal. I don't know
Is
what
that
the normal
common?
temperature
I
is.
know. No, that's about typical. But I mean, some people
Okay.
like their coffee hotter. Some might like it
Yeah.
cooler.
Wow.
So yeah, and it's it's one of those things where you don't know that you need it until you have one of these and you're never drinking cold coffee. And I drink slowly, so I'm inevitably going to have one. And then you put it in the microwave and it never tastes right. So
That's right.
it's lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's great.
so that's what that is.
And I know they have a pretty new program called cold chain management. Do you want to speak to
Yes.
that at all?
It's a fascinating innovation and something that I think so many people don't really know about. I think COVID really brought cold chain to the vernacular of the everyday person because of the fact that the vaccines needed to be transported at very precise temperatures. But a lot of pharmaceuticals need to be transported at cold temperatures. And if they lose that temperature, they lose their efficacy. And so you've got waste from that. And the way that product is transported today is in corrugated cardboard with gel packs.
Yep.
So you can imagine the amount of waste, as well as waste of the packaging materials that typically are not recycled. And then also if they get left somewhere midstream, they miss a flight, etc., the product inside, which is oftentimes very expensive, can be rendered useless. So the product, the Cold Cube, is a reusable, smart box, effectively, that will keep the temperature at what you set it at. It also has
Wow.
GPS tracking so that you know exactly where that cube is at any point in time along its journey to its ultimate destination. And then once it's reached the destination, the receiver simply pushes return to home, and it sends out a signal to the carrier, be it UPS or FedEx. They will come and pick it up and return it.
What?
Mm-hmm. And
Oh,
so
that's
it
cool.
is
It's incredible.
reusable. Yeah, it's reusable. It's trackable. It'll tell you the temperature. So if my example that I gave, if it misses the plane, it's sitting on a tarmac, you can tell the temperature of the product inside, so that if the product is still good or if it needs to be plugged in and cooled again, or get it to another temperature. So it's an amazing solution for a problem that's been out there for a long time. But Ember has partnered with Cardinal Health Solutions, and a U.S. exclusive to bring it to market, and exclusively for their business from a business to business standpoint. So it's very exciting.
The wonderful world of supply chain when we don't even know what's out there, but we need solutions for it. I had no idea, would never have crossed my mind, but what an awesome piece of technology to bring to market, and really cool, really fascinating.
Awesome. All right, let's switch to more of your background. So you say you've been in supply chain since before supply chain was a thing. What else has changed since you've joined the industry?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because the term supply chain wasn't around. My first job in the field I was a supply line manager, and even that was like, what you're a purchasing manager? But I think a lot has changed. I think first and foremost, I look at the way that we treat and hold our supplier relationships today. When I started in the business, I feel like the buyer and the seller, it was more of a transactional, and in some cases, an us versus them relationship where you were, firmly negotiating solely on price. And it was, what can you do for me? And, the buyer was sometimes the beating up the supplier. I definitely have seen that, the relationship between a supplier and the buyer change and become much more of a partnership, and with suppliers adding much more value to the equation than 20, 30 years ago.
What are some of those examples of that you can touch on of just providing value from a supplier aspect to the customer, right? I mean, what's changed about that, where it's not just about price or speed or quality, and really providing, I guess, the value to you guys?
Yeah. Well, it used to be, even when you think about, buying, you can name anything, but let's just say, you're buying a widget. It used to be that you just look for, the widget that serves your needs, and looking for the lowest cost of that. Now you take into account, well, what other services does that widget supplier provide me? Can they help me with my design? Can they help me with development? Can they offer supply chain services? So lead time reduction opportunities. Can they provide me with engineering support? So it becomes where you're not just negotiating on price or looking for the lowest cost. You're looking for the highest value. And that takes into account more than just the price tag. It takes into account the quality of the product, the lead time of the product. I mean, I may be able to get a part for 10 cents cheaper, which based on volume could mean a lot. But if the lead time is a year and I can get another product for 6 months at 6-month lead time, then there's a value equation there. It's because if I have to buy much further out where my forecast may not be as solid, there's more risk. So you have to take into account all of that. And so I feel like, that's where the term supply chain has really derived from, is it's much more than just purchasing and the act of buying. It's come down to understanding all aspects of that cycle and utilizing that as you work with a supplier. And the suppliers have responded, right? They're bringing more of that value add capability to the table.
And weren't you saying that back in the 90s, you used a yellow book to find your vendors?
Yeah, you're dating me, Michelle.
And so I think
Oy.
But I think that points to the searchability. Like once
100%.
brands can get more choice in who they get to work with, that it really opens up it opens up the chance to have a relationship versus, I have to use you. You could treat me terribly, but I have to use you.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the competitive landscape has completely changed, right? I mean, once you had online presence and people could search just plug it into a search engine and off you go. And up comes all the different choices. And, you can get very specific with your searches. It used to be that you literally would use catalogs to find suppliers of, whether it's a good or a service. And sometimes your search was based on how current the catalog was. And then also just, a lot of it was just relationship based, who you knew and who was referred to you. But that competitive landscape has dramatically changed. It's allowed more entrants, I think, into the marketplace and to become viable candidates. And then also, it's driven them to be more value added, as we discussed, because there are more entrants. But yeah, I remember when I was in a supply line management position, we had one cube that was effectively like the library of those catalog books.
Oh my gosh!
And the buyers would go there to look up and look for something that a customer, an internal person wanted. Yeah. And so that's how we would often source goods and services.
That's great. Okay, so yellow books, leave them in the past. Bullying and the rough relationships, leave them in the past. What would you keep and bring? Like, what did you think we did really well at the early days of supply chain that it's either good that we're keeping, or maybe we should bring back a little bit more?
What we're starting to see, and we're starting to see it again, is in some cases is more vertical integration. And what I mean by that is where a supplier they'll say they produce the widget, but they'll also provide packaging, or they'll provide the raw material that goes into the widget. So they own more steps in the manufacturing process. And it used to be that companies they were completely vertically integrated. So they owned all the aspects, including, say, the end manufacturing. Huh. And then we've gone, and that went, to where it was almost 180 degrees. The vertical integration completely went away. And I think we are starting to see some of that come back, largely because, the pandemic really shined a light on our dependence on all of these sub-tier suppliers, many of which are geographically dispersed. And so if just one cog in that wheel is impacted, it impacts everything. And so we are starting to see some of those providers be vertically integrated so that the supplier has more ownership and isn't 100% reliant for all aspects of their business. So that's I think that's a change that we're starting to see, and it's not necessarily a bad one. I don't think we'll go back to seeing 100% vertical integration because it's hard to be good at everything, but maybe to have a bit more ownership on some of the aspects.
Yeah, and then you don't have to manage as many relationships. It's nice when
and you have a little more control
than
being 100%. And I guess the word would be vulnerable, depending on the climate of the market.
Great. All right. So you spent quite a few years in supply chain, and then you decided to hop over to Blue Cross Blue Shield to solve more logistics problems, but not focused on getting goods from point A to point B. So can you describe what your role was there?
Yeah, it was kind of a funny story in the sense of, I'd worked in technology since I got out of school. High tech is awesome, fast paced, but you ride the wave, right, of the highs and lows of the tech field. And we're seeing that today, right, in some of the announcements that are being made with the layoffs. So I had ridden that wave for a good while and decided to, maybe make a bit of a change. And that's the beauty of supply chain, right? It is a highly transferable skill. And saw a position as the director of demand management. Well, in my world, coming from supply chain management, demand management is managing the demand from your customer that will ultimately drive a supply forecast. So I thought, okay, I know what that is. I know how to do that. But the weird thing was the role was in IT. So long story short, I interviewed and I got the position. And what it was that the company had outsourced their IT infrastructure, so their data center, to a third party. And as part of the deal, they bought back resources, human resources, to manage IT work, IT projects. They had IT engineering. And so the demand management aspect was managing that pool of resources and setting up a forecasting process that they'd never needed before because they'd never outsourced it. They were all internal Blue Cross resources. And so managing, how do we take our requirements internally and turn those into a forecast, if you will, and a resource allocation. And so the experience that I'd gained in forecasting and managing supply really translated into the exact same thing, but it was with people and time.
Wow. Would you say it was easier, harder than your previous positions? How did it compare?
Well, that's it's harder. You can't roll over people resources, meaning it's perishable, right? I can't say,
Right.
but I underused 20 hours last month. Let me roll those over into this month.
Totally.
So you don't have that capability. And then the other thing that you had to deal with was that you had finite resources of different skill sets. It was really fun developing that forecasting capability, developing a demand management process with the outsourced provider. And it took us about a year to get it really up and running and humming.
Nice.
It was good.
That's great. And so how would you describe those skills to be applicable to, the rest of your supply chain? Were you able to bring anything over when you came back?
Well, first and foremost, you had what I definitely knew was, supplier relationships, right?
Yep.
Supplier management. And the truth is it doesn't matter what it is that you're buying. The relationship between the buyer and the seller, the supplier and the customer, it's the same. It's the same fundamentals. Understanding the business relationship, the contractual terms, but more important, than the contract is just how are we going to work together? Like we mutually have a goal. And so it's understanding their goal and they understanding our goal as a customer and then working together to get there. So I knew that. I understood outsourcing and the fact that for many clients, that can be a challenge. So let me give you just a quick example. You can own a piece of your business. We can use this as an example, right? The data center used to be, managed and owned by Blue Cross, and Blue Cross employees ran it. But then all of a sudden, when you sell that entity and now you're buying back the capability, all the things that you couldn't do before, now you magically expect them to be done.
Yep.
Right.
And so, so oftentimes that the outsourcing provider is like starts in a hole because there are expectations on them that are somewhat unrealistic. So I think, bringing that kind of empathy and understanding to the table and knowing that from my outsourcing background in the past really does help. I think understanding the fundamentals of forecasting and planning. And again, it doesn't really matter what you're forecasting. It's the same skill set that you bring to the role. And I'm not an IT person at all. I know enough now to be dangerous and to kind of sound like I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But that wasn't what was required. right? It was those business competencies that were really needed.
That's great. All right, let's talk about your consulting company. Can you first tell us how you got the name Blind Dog?
Yes. Well, first off, I'd have to give a shout out to my son who named the company. During COVID, I adopted a dog. I, got Phoebe when she was 7 weeks old, and she
Aw.
was blind. Yeah, she was the runt of the litter, and all her siblings were like just clamoring on top of her, and I felt so bad. I said, "I'll take that one."
That's great.
And she was blind from birth. She was a rescue. So, long story short, I have a blind dog. And my son had said, "Well, you should name your consulting company Blind Dog Risk." And I thought, well, that's kind of fun. And then I came up with the logo. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. And and it stuck. And so that's how I got the name.
That's awesome. Oh,
Yeah.
so cool.
It's great.
All right, so what's next for Blind Dog? What do you have planned this year?
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of just getting back out there, utilizing my network to find opportunities. But at the heart of it, I really love to develop processes. We talked a little bit about the demand management. One is building a capability that wasn't there. And I enjoy doing that, working on a project level on a specific task or initiative problem, and working to implement the solution, and then moving on to the next project. So I'm really looking for those opportunities. Honestly, the industry does not matter to me. Like I said, it could be electronics or technology. It could be consumer products. It could be really any industry. The beauty of supply chain is that it's highly transferable. So that's what I'm hoping to do this year. I'm excited to get back out there.
Excellent. I wish you the best of
Fantastic.
luck. If people want to get a hold
Yeah,
of you,
thank
how
you.
should they reach you?
My email would probably be the best way, at Siobhan@blinddogrisk.com. And I would love to hear from you.
Excellent. We'll put it in the transcript. Okay,
Thank you.
I have one final question before we pass it to Alex. I always like to end with
Yeah.
career advice. What would you give someone looking to join supply chain? Any advice you'd have?
Yeah, look, years ago when I was going through university, there was no such thing as a supply chain management degree. And now there is, which is awesome. But that does not mean that, you can only be in supply chain if you get a degree in supply chain and operations. And not at all. Not at all. I've seen a lot of engineers be in the supply chain world, which is actually great because then they have the technical chops, especially in, say, a high-tech environment. But, I'd say focus on where are your strengths? Are you analytical? Are you good with numbers? If so, you might want to look at starting your career in planning, supply chain planning, master planning. Really takes advantage of those skill sets. If you are really good at communications, maybe negotiation, you're a real people person, going into the sourcing side, maybe, or being a buyer, maybe the right place for you to start. I take the notion to cast a wide net.
Uh-huh.
The benefit of being of my career path is that I've done a bit of everything, and not necessarily focused in on one aspect of supply chain, because there's so many, right? All the way from forecasting all the way through reverse logistics. And you can go deep in any one of those. When you're young or starting out, try to see what all of them are like, take opportunities to be exposed to all of those facets. And then you may decide to go deep in one of them and become a subject matter expert, or kind of stay to where you can, take on more of maybe a overall supply chain management leadership role, which is really the kind of the path that I took. It is a wonderful career path for anyone.
Love it.
It is. Definitely is. And Siobhan, we've so enjoyed having you on. Wrapping it up here with some speed questions, speed round, fun questions. So if you didn't work in supply chain, what would you be doing?
You know, at my age, we get to ask that question a lot. You know, it's like, what would you do? And if income, and sadly it is the case, but if it wasn't, I think I'd be a high school teacher. I like that age group. I mean, it's a tough age too, especially as you're getting close to making a decision, right? Are you going to go the college route? Are you gonna go into the workforce? And what I've found, and I've done quite a bit of volunteering in high schools, in speaking and doing guest teaching, is that so many kids are coming out of school, young adults, I should say, without necessary life skills. They don't really know what a resume is. They don't know interviewing skills. They don't understand how interest works. They don't understand what a credit score is, and why that's important. Even debt, just to name a few. So if I could go back, I think I'd be a high school teacher that could teach life skills and go through all those things that, we come out of school with, and many of us as 18-year-olds and don't understand. Yeah. I think I'd be pretty good at it. So that's what I would do. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Fantastic. I guess switching gears, are you watching anything good right now?
I just finished watching Breaking Bad, the full series. I had originally watched it about 7.5 years ago. So it was long enough to where, I knew it, but I couldn't remember all the details.
Yep.
And so I just finished watching it. God, that show is so good. It's so good. Even watching it the second time, I was like, God, this is a great show. So
that's right.
Yes. And then, you meet people that are like, oh yeah, I never liked it. And I'm like, oh no, how? but yeah. So Breaking Bad was that was what I went to for the last couple months, as I went through all the seasons.
That's great. All right, wrapping up here. Last question for me. Anything that we haven't asked you that you wanted us to ask, or that you want to bring up now?
If there's folks listening and are thinking about a career, I would highly recommend. I think that you can be technical, you can be business oriented, you could have just about any type of discipline. You also don't necessarily, need to have a college education. If you are smart and sharp and work hard to get into the space, it can be a wonderful opportunity for you. So I would just, highly recommend it, for everyone. And I really appreciate you guys having me on today. This has been a lot of fun.
Well, we appreciate you joining us on this episode of Supply Chain Therapy, Siobhan. So thank you again, and we'll see you around.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.